It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today, guess what? Another hodgepodge episode. But we do have a good chunk of it devoted to broadcast rights for UFC because their deal is on the table. So we've got lots and lots of content about that. We've got some content about boxing. We've got some stuff on PFL, and we have a listener question from our Substack comments. So if you want to get all of this, everything, the free content, the bonus content, you gotta subscribe because that enables you to have access to everything, and it helps us stay afloat. So John, how the heck are you?
Coughing tremendously, so hopefully it doesn't interrupt the show, but good. I'm still in Minnesota for one more week. My older brother is out here from Hawaii, so he left the hellhole that is Hawaii to come to Minnesota, the paradise that is Minnesota. So that's how I'm doing.
Well, your mom's gonna miss you. You gotta soak up all that mom time this week.
I think she's already tired of me, to tell you the truth, but we'll see.
You're no longer the favorite son.
Well, yeah, I don't think any of her sons are her favorites. She's actually, I got to speak to my cousins because none of us have kids. We're like the Hitler's nephews. We've decided none of us have children, and she's throwing all of her love onto my cousins' kids. So I got to have a talking to them about maybe some financial compensation for getting an extra grandma out of this.
That's the way to do it, definitely. So, John, there is a really, really interesting rumor that's been swirling around about who could be possibly introducing the amendment for the Ali Act on behalf of TKO. Who was that, and why do you think that they're going to go with that particular person?
Well, the person I think that brought up the rumor was Eric McGracken. Had said he'd heard a rumor. I haven't heard it yet. But I, to be honest, I haven't had the rounds to text around to people and try to call or try to track it down. I've been busy doing parent stuff. So, but the rumor is that your senator, not my senator, your senator Ted Cruz down there in Texas, that he is the person that will be introducing the Ali Act amendment to or amending, not the Ali Act amendment, because that was a specific bill to amend it to expand it to MMA, but he'll be introducing a bill to amend the Ali Act on behalf of TKO.
Yeah, he's definitely not the person I voted for, but that is wild. Now, why do you think that they would go with him rather than Markwayne Mullin, who is also quite firmly in that Republican camp?
Well, I think one is, I don't know if Markwayne Mullin is fully on board with the plans they have, because he does seem to have a poor relationship with Dana White and the UFC, right? And so, he was the person you'd think, because he is the guy that originally introduced the Ali Act amendment to expand it to MMA. He's the person that has some combat sports experience. He's made this kind of his purpose in Congress, was to expand the Ali Act to MMA. But I can only assume, I've tried to contact him. I've talked to him in the past, and I have not got a hold of him. It's harder to get a hold of members of Congress now since they changed the rules about how you can contact them. But I've tried to contact him and discuss this with him, and I have not yet. But, maybe we can infer that he's not as gung-ho, because he'd be my first choice. Now, Ted Cruz makes some sense because he's a diehard conservative Republican, but also he's one that showed up recently at a UFC event. And so it's very possible he is trying to get in good with that world. He views that, helping the TKO, Dana White, and everybody involved on this will get him some brownie points with the mega crowd, which he's trying to cater to. So that makes some sense that he might be the person to bring it forward. Because again, as I said, he was at the recent UFC event. Maybe he's looking to get the same rub that others apparently have gotten from being close to the UFC.
Do you think that they can successfully amend the act?
That is the 60-cent question. It's going to be hard because you need 60 votes to get over a filibuster, to get to pass in Senate. Congress, they only have a 3-vote majority in the House with Republicans, so it's going to be close. But one is right now, if Trump asked the GOP to vote for it, I think it's very likely that across the board, the GOP members, the Republicans will vote for it. So it'll clear the House. Senate, though, you're going to be well short you're going to need 7 Democrats. But the part you got to remember is, as we mentioned before, you got Sean O'Brien out there, who has been very friendly to the Republicans for the head of the Teamsters, which is, a position we're not used to. He's been making inroads with Republicans as a friendly union member. And so you have someone maybe that they could use to position this, because as Luke Thomas mentioned, they've talked about adding more fighter protections for health in this amendment, and also minimum wages. So you could see someone like him stepping forward and say it's a pro-labor bill. Maybe that'll get some Democrats. On top of that, Ari Emanuel has a brother, Rahm Emanuel, who is very important in the Democratic Party. He's not liked by the entire Democratic Party. Large segments of it are not happy with him in some of his positions, but there's also a large segment that still works with him and are probably very friendly with him. He probably could make calls and talk to people. And so maybe they're imagining those two wings together, we can get enough Democratic votes that we could get it over the hurdle in the Senate. So, is it a done deal guarantee? I'm not sure, but it seems very possible that they could successfully introduce a bill. There's not enough people that follow the sport. It's not like back in the 90s or 2000s when there were several members of the Senate, the House and the Senate that were boxing fans. So when they introduced the Ali Act the first time, you had people actually passionate about the subject. There's like a handful of people that have any interest at all in mixed martial arts, probably in the Senate and the House, except for the people that are butt kissing Donald Trump with the use of the UFC. So I can imagine most people saying it's not that important. There's not much pushback, sign it and move it on.
Man, it sounds dismal, John.
I'm sorry to depress you so early in the show. We got much more time to make you more depressed, though.
The Ring, they are reporting that Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn generated 620,000 pay-per-view buys. Do you believe that's accurate considering the source?
I tend to believe this more because the original amount that it said it did, that was floating around, was 1 million. And that was said by Eddie Hearn. And I think he called it UK and worldwide. So for the Ring to come out with a much lower number than what, instead of pushing the number Eddie Hearn pushed out there, that gives me that. I'm not going to guarantee it's correct. Who knows? But it makes me feel it's more likely that this is accurate. And it's possible that they're proud of the number, and that's why they want to float the 620,000 pay-per-views. Also, because the boxing combat sports fan base have such inflated expectations for what pay-per-views should do, a lot of them are going to treat this 620,000 as a failure. So if the Ring wanted to lie about the number, you think they would put up a much bigger number, right? I'm thinking that they're happy with this. And, they grouped the entire UK, US, the main pay-per-view markets to come up with this number. But I'm going to say I consider it's much more likely to be accurate. We can wait, though, because soon, I don't know when, but within the amount of time, a month, maybe a couple of weeks, the BARB, the Broadcasting Audience Research Board of the UK, will release numbers as well. So we can compare it and see how close they were.
If it is 620,000, you said people are treating this like it's a failure. How do you view it?
Oh, I think that's a success. They're charging £20 per pay-per-view in the UK, 20. So you're talking about $16 million. I think that's what 16 million US is what Matt Brown over at Brunch Boxing calculated. That's the gross. They're probably keeping 70%. So you're over 10, 11 million. Throw in the gate, auxiliary revenues from other broadcast deals and sponsorship and advertising. It probably did over 20 million. So, the rumors floating around is to get combined. They both did about $5 to $7.5 million US. So this is a successful event. The two boxers are going to walk out with a lot of money for boxers. The promoters are going to make some money on it. It's not going to be a money loser. They probably had a big sponsorship deal with the Saudis. It might have been well above 20 million when you add it all together. I would say this is a success. And as an individual show, this is a success. But again, combat sports guys seem to be preoccupied with the 2 or 3 massive events per year instead of the, or basically the million plus pay-per-views. They seem unwilling to accept that when you sell, what I guess is a moderate number of pay-per-views, though, that's really a very successful event.
Sticking with Eddie Hearn, he had an interview and he says that UFC has basically a star power problem and says that the company doesn't even have 6 superstars that he knows of on a roster of more than 700. Do you think he's right?
Well, yes, I think he is actually right. I mean, I'm going to give a little pushback towards him because I think it's also a little misleading. One is it's combat sports is cyclical in nature. We had a bunch of big stars. It's dropped off now. We have stars in other remote parts of the world that aren't as big as sellers in the Western audience. That's part of it. The other big thing, I think he's comparing it to the UK. UK boxing is, UK boxing is a major sport. Gets major time on the networks and the sports channels talk. In the US, boxing is now moved over to a niche sport. MMA is probably, UFC is a niche sport as well, except for the fact that UFC is on ESPN, so they talk about it a little more than they would normally. But in the UK, you have these major figures in boxing, Fury and Joshua. Everybody, I'm sure, in the UK knows who they are. Conor Benn, everybody knows. Eubank Jr., everybody knows. So there's Usyk, probably a large percentage know because of his victories over the 2 heavyweights that everybody knows. There's several boxers that are well known in the UK. So yes, there's a large number. The regular people on the street probably know, a large number of boxers, much more than the regular person knows MMA fighters. Now in America, though, I do think there's star power or potential star power in boxing. But as we've discussed, because boxing is kind of moved away from having regular broadcasts on any channel that people watch, the star, even though there's people that have star potential, I think the average person knows less about boxing right now, boxing stars, than they have in a long time. There's, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, almost everybody that watched sports at all would know who, Mayweather and Canelo less so, but Mayweather and Pacquiao. There's a list of boxers that were fighting at the time that everybody was aware of and knew who they were. And now we get to today, and again, it's niche. It's on DAZN. No one's watching it. So I think his comparison is much more about the UK when he talks about boxing to the US. But at the same time, I think there's just a lack of star power in the US, especially for both, because the regular person doesn't know. I mean, I don't know I don't hang out. Most people in my life don't watch boxing or MMA, especially MMA. I know more boxing fans, and none of them know anything about UFC. I mean, they probably the most famous guys: McGregor, Ronda Rousey, and Brock Lesnar, and GSP. Those 4, and they're basically long gone.
Would you say that their star power was because they were able to transcend MMA? Like they all had movie roles. Even Brock Lesnar had a movie role. I can't remember what the name of it, but he had a bit part in a movie. But all of them ended up in movies. Would that be the reason, was because of that transcendence? And we don't have that. We don't see that. Not even Anderson Silva achieved that. Yeah,
well, I mean, Anderson Silva was massive, though, in Brazil. I'll give him, that's one thing. He got huge in Brazil. He had a Burger King ad. Is that Brock movie? Is that the one where he lifts up the shark? There's always an image everybody shows of Brock lifting a shark and throwing it at people.
Yeah.
So
I think that was just it. I think so.
Oh, God, what a terrible looking movie. That's the case. But as we get to, I think they transcended the sport, but part of it is, we have John Jones. I should say he's probably more famous now than he's been ever, even though he fights less, because he's the guy in MMA. And if you casually are aware of MMA, you've heard his name thrown about. But I think it's just a process of luck has a thing to do with it, but also the UFC, one is they've expanded and they've built up stars or signed people from regions that the general American audience is interested in. And also, it's just the way the UFC works now. We do talk about, they put the brand over the fighters, and it's always been the case, but it's never been more so the case, I think. It's never been more so that I've never seen Dana White promoted so much as he's been last few years. Just an observation. I could be wrong, but it just feels like Dana White presence outside UFC. He's always been front and center of the UFC, but outside the UFC, when you hear about it, he's there now all the time. And I think that kind of sucks the oxygen away from the chance to introduce fighters to the fan base and say, this is the guy. Because I remember in the past, they would sometimes put fighters out to do interviews to kind of like represent the UFC on local channels or on, even ESPN and other Fox Sports. Now it seems they call and they get Dana White to represent that spot, to stand in for that spot. And it's like, well, again, he's sucking up the oxygen. We're not introducing the fan base to these colorful characters that we did before when we would send the fighters out. Now it's all Dana White.
Yeah, for sure, man. Okay, so along the same track, Eddie Hearn also discussed the idea of TKO promoting Canelo versus Crawford. Now, what did he say there, and was he correct?
Well, the big point, though, I think this is what you're alluding to, and this is the part that caught my attention, was he talked about how much they would be the promoter, even though the Saudis would be paying for everything, but they'd be the promoter, how much Canelo and Crawford both would be making. And he estimated a combined purse of anywhere from 120 to 150 million, which, again, it sounds like a lot, and it is an awful lot of money. In fact, there was a story, and I don't know if it's accurate at all, that Canelo's 4-fight deal with the Saudis is for 200 million over 4 fights. So that's just an insane amount of money for a boxer to have guaranteed. But for this fight, you're talking about these two, Canelo and Crawford together would make 120 to 150 million. I imagine Canelo has a 2-to-1 in favor on the split. So he's getting, let's say, 80 to 100 million, Crawford 40 to 50 million. And Hearn's point was, what are the UFC fighters going to say, or the WWE wrestlers, when they see how much money that you're paying these guys that are generating similar revenue that you generate? If you're John Jones and you're going to fight Aspinall or whoever, and it's going to sell 1.5 million pay-per-views, they say it's going to be the biggest UFC event ever. Let's say it does 1.5 million pay-per-views. And he said Canelo versus Crawford sells 1.5 million pay-per-views. Why wouldn't Aspinall and John Jones expect 150 to 150 million then? And I think he has a point, except for, as we've seen, every time information gets revealed to the fighters, they seem to like either ignore it or come up with a new justification why it makes sense that they don't make nearly as much as boxers.
Yeah, it's what I like to call Stockholm Syndrome inside the UFC. It's crazy.
I think they just realize, or they've come to the conclusion they can't do anything about it, so we have to justify it. Or they, I know a large number of them disbelieve the amounts that boxers make, but having talked to the promoters, having seen some of the contracts, seen the lawsuits, it's like those numbers are often real. I mean, yeah, they inflate it when you hear these numbers like, oh, we have an estimate. Yeah, some of those are misleading or wrong, but often we'll get exact numbers from a lawsuit or something, and you're like, yeah, it's multiples what you guys make. And MMA fighters just don't seem to, they just can't process it for some reason.
Now, Eddie went on to talk about Dana White, and he sort of sounded dismissive about Dana White and TKO actually putting their feet into boxing. Do you think this is bluster, or does he really believe it?
I don't know. I mean, in some ways, I hope he doesn't believe it. I hope it's just talk that he's trying to work himself up or convince the fan base that he's going to put up a fight. Because I make sense that sometimes, like, I know boxing, these guys aren't ready. Okay, that's fine, Eddie Hearn. I'm sure you know much more about how boxing works than these guys, especially Dana White. Nick Khan knows a little bit more. Lawrence Epstein, he's been years since he had to deal with boxers, so maybe he's out of practice. You're better at it, but I think if he really believes they don't have a shot, I'm going to say you're being delusional, and I don't think that's the case. I think he's just putting on a brave face, because yes, they don't have a shot when they have to work with the way boxing works. But we're talking about people that plan to amend the Ali Act. Obviously, they want to amend it for reasons that benefit them. They are dealing with a company that has a near monopoly. I'd say they are a monopoly, but market power, I should say, in pro wrestling and WWE, and one that definitely has extreme market power in MMA and the UFC, both of which, as entities, their industries generate as much as boxing, but they get to keep all the money. So they have monopoly rents to work with. They have connections to work with that boxers don't because of those entities. And they have the Saudis that have right now an open checkbook that is going to throw out tons of money to work with. So if you're going to amend the Alley Act and have that to work with it, I would be a little more nervous on his part. That's not to say, yeah, Hearn, you might be, I'll promote the hell of them, run laps around them in the boxing promotion world, how it works. But if they're going to just disrupt this whole system, smash it with their money, then your knowledge of the boxing game doesn't really matter.
Let's talk about the broadcast rights deal that's coming up for UFC. And we've got quite a few articles and quotes here that we're going to discuss. So the first one, excuse me, it posits that the UFC pay-per-view model could end up being a thing of the past if they end up with Amazon or Netflix as their broadcast partner. Do you think that that's likely to be the case?
I honestly don't personally. I mean, people are throwing this around that, that these entities don't want pay-per-view, especially Netflix. They don't do pay-per-view. And everybody knows that Netflix is supposedly the front runner to get the UFC. So everybody's imagining they'll get rid of pay-per-view. I don't think that's going to be the case, though, because they are asking for so much for their pay-per-views. Right now, we know they get about 20 million, a little over 20 million, guaranteed per pay-per-view from ESPN. That's a guaranteed locked amount. And they're looking for anywhere a multiplier at the bottom end of 1.5, at the top end to 2x to maybe 2.5x is possible. I think that'd be ridiculous, but 2x will say maximum. So that means over the lifespan, if the deal that they had with ESPN, I think the average valuation, annual evaluation was 16 million, because it started around 12 to 13 million when they first had it 7 years ago. Every year it goes up 8%, I think it went up, and now it's over 20 million, 21 million. So the average valuation of that deal was 16 million per year per pay-per-view, or I think for 12 pay-per-views. I'm not sure exactly what happens when they do above 12. They get paid or they get a smaller payment. But on the new deal, that means that they're doing 200%. They're looking for over 30 million valuation. So they would start, mid 26, 27 and get all the way up to 40 million on the value per pay. That's just a tremendous amount of money. Does Netflix want to do that, especially when you see the results in some of these pay-per-views? So I'm not certain they want to do that. In fact, I kind of don't, because we had Netflix co-CEO, CEO Ted Sarandos, I think his name is.
Yes.
Who he had a quote that says they remain really focused on the big breakthrough events. And everybody took that to mean it doesn't sound like you want the entire, you wouldn't want the UFC library of pay-per-views because they're not all breakthrough events. But I could take it to mean that he wants maybe 4 events per year that are going to be big events, and they're willing to pay that price for 4 events as long as it gives them the numbers, in which case Netflix would want other portions of the deal. But I don't think, just based on what we've seen before, based on what they want for the numbers, the amount, based on what we know about Netflix, I don't see them getting rid of the pay-per-view model at all this round. I think they're going to try to do something to rejuvenate it. But for right now, I think they're gonna remain pay-per-view, because that's the best way to get the most money. Because when they quote them often, we will see in these articles, we'll see quotes, oh, they have a $300 million deal with Netflix. They want this huge deal, and they always forget to add, yes, but that deal also includes the pay-per-view component, which is over 200 million. So it's really a 500 million plus deal with ESPN. I don't think Netflix or Amazon or anybody could do that without pay-per-view.
I have an oddball side question on this. What about the show at the Sphere? Do you think that will play into these conversations with Netflix and Amazon as like a showpiece? Hey, you could get this.
Yeah, I think part of it, Zane Simon made an observation. I think it was very accurate, that part of the Sphere show was a demonstration, because they had all the executives from Netflix and Amazon and all the broadcasters there they wanted to show them what kind of production value they could do. And so with that in mind, it's like I could see Netflix going, we want shows like this. And maybe some, if they get a big enough deal, maybe they go, we're going to have special shows per year for Netflix that are going to have dramatic visuals or whatever, or spectacular locations. But something like the Sphere, or something similar or some other gimmick idea. But I could see that as a possibility. I think the whole point was to show the capabilities they have on production.
Another article came out with quotes from Jimmy Pitaro, who is ESPN's head, saying that he doesn't think UFC is going anywhere. So how likely is it that ESPN would get broadcast rights again? To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!